The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. Last week we came to you with the story reported by Glenn Greenwald in The Guardian about a document which said that the NSA is at least through Verizon. It specifically talked about Verizon Wireless obtaining records of millions of customers, phone records, who called who, without the content, without recordings of those messages, but for people who are not even suspected of having committed any crime, for people who are not under any kind of suspicion at all. The question was, who leaked the documents? Who gave these documents to Glenn Greenwald? And we now know that it is this man, 29-year-old Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden has admitted that he is responsible for what is really one of the most significant leaks in U.S. political history. He is a 29-year-old former technical assistant for the CIA and current employee of the defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton. He'd been working at the National Security Agency for the last 4 years as an employee of a number of different outside contractors, including Booz Allen and Dell. And just a few days after the initial news broke, The Guardian is revealing his identity at the request of Snowden himself. This is somewhat unusual. Here is part of an interview that Glenn Greenwald did with Edward Snowden. Take a look at this.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
What are some of the positions that you held previously within the intelligence community?
I've been a systems engineer, systems administrator, senior advisor for the Central Intelligence Agency, solutions consultant, and a telecommunications information systems officer. I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned,
And then Snowden talking about what happens now, what happens to him, and he worked for the CIA, NSA. He knows exactly what could happen to him.
Yeah, I could be, rendered by the CIA. I could have people come after me, or any of their third-party partners. They work closely with a number of other nations. Or they could pay off the triads, or any of their agents or assets. We've got a CIA station just up the road in the consulate here in Hong Kong, and I'm sure they're going to be very busy for the next week. And that's a fear I'll live under for the rest of my life, however long that happens to be.
So in a note that went with the first set of documents he provided, he wrote, "I understand that I will be made to suffer for my actions, but I will be satisfied if the federation of secret law, unequal pardon, and irresistible executive powers that rule the world that I love are revealed even for an instant." He has said he doesn't expect to see home again. He doesn't want to live in a society that does these types of things. He believed in President Obama's promises. Presidents openly lie to secure the office, and the government has granted itself power it is not entitled to. There's so much to discuss here, and I want to first just take a step back a little bit, and then we're going to talk more specifically about Edward Snowden. So number one, this is not about whether the NSA obtaining these phone records from millions of Verizon customers who were not under any specific suspicion is legal. The Patriot Act makes this legal. This is really not also about knowing that it's going on. We basically knew this was going on. We certainly knew the capabilities existed for this to go on. We just didn't really know the extent of it. And this is also, it is about whether the law has to be changed and why we should or shouldn't be against this, and whether people will do anything to actually change this law. What about the politicians, as I said last week, who voted for the Patriot Act but are against this type of surveillance? They they must bear some responsibility on fixing this, don't they? And will people protest in the streets? This is very different, I think, than Bradley Manning, because number one, it hits much closer to home for a lot of people. And number two, the fact that we have this interview with Edward Snowden already has made him a different type of character that is going to be far more difficult to, he won't be beyond scrutiny, but it will be far more difficult to assail his character. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about Edward Snowden's, the money that he was paid, this $200,000 salary, where he went to college. What about, I don't know that those are really the right things to focus on, right? I think that if we're going to talk about the kind of ancillary outside of the NSA observing, having these records specifically, the question is, what about private contractors' unbridled power? I mean, Edward Snowden says during that interview that he could basically wiretap anybody. He could get phone records for whoever he wanted. He could, if he had the president's private email address, if the president had a private email address, he could read the president's email. So those are really the concerns. We need to put aside a little bit that Edward Snowden made $200,000 a year in his mid-20s. That's not really the issue here. Let's talk specifically about Edward Snowden. I believe that we need to wait and see exactly what Edward Snowden's motives were here. I think that it is perfectly possible and plausible that Edward Snowden had the best of intentions in giving these documents to Glenn Greenwald. I think it is also possible that Edward Snowden had motives we don't yet know about that may have pushed him to contact Glenn Greenwald and to give him these documents. We have a lot of people online all over the place evaluating the character and the motives of someone they had never even heard about until yesterday, June 9th, right? I mean, from the point of view of popular culture or the kind of public record, Edward Snowden did not exist before June 9th. His Wikipedia page was created yesterday, June 9th. We have no idea. I can't believe I sound like Donald Rumsfeld here, but we don't yet know what we don't know about Edward Snowden that may have influenced his actions.